you can't do everything, and that's where the resources are not unlimited. And one thing that we've been talking about a lot all spring is our budget and how that's evolved from what the school board hoped the legislature would pass, what our community advocated for, and ultimately what the governor signed this spring and summer, I guess. I'm interested in your take on it. What did we learn since our last time we've talked about it, and what does that mean for us?
So of course, the public ask and the advocacy around the way schools have been funded by the legislature in the last couple of years was we were asking for more than what we received. We ended up receiving $325 per pupil, which is a larger number than what we have seen in recent years. But it's not enough to make up that gap of some of the zero per pupil increases that we had seen in some of the prior years. So while we are grateful that we have that dollar amount is higher than it has been in recent years, right now it's not enough to close some of the gaps that we're going to have in our current budget. And we are really fortunate here in the school district of South Milwaukee that the community has elected a board that is dedicated to high quality experiences for our kids and retaining those first and foremost, and then making sure that our staff have what they need and we can support retaining high quality teachers here and high quality employees in all areas and try to navigate a budget. And so, like you said, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And it's one pot of money, so it can do anything, but it can't do everything. And that'll be the process that we work on in this next year. To try to navigate some of the way we had forecasted the budget versus the $325 per pupil that ended up coming in. That has allowed us to have we're running a bit of a deficit budget right now out of our fund balance. And so that deficit is smaller than it would have been. Yeah. So it helped, right? It mitigated part of the problem, but it has not solved it for us here in South Milwaukee. And one of the things that we were really advocating for was an increase in reimbursement for the students with special needs. We are providing some great services here. And while we can always grow in that area, we are doing our very best to meet the needs of those students. But those experiences are costly, right? And that's where there's a reimbursement from the state for those things. It's disappointing that there weren't more dollars dedicated to that area in particular. But we are where we are. And the increase there went from 30% reimbursement to 33, a little over 33. So it did certainly help, but it hasn't solved our short-term budget issue. And so we're working together as a team, and we'll start to engage staff in the community and what really are our priorities here that we need to be sure we protect as we have to reduce some expenditures right now. And what does that mean for the broader community? Because I think one of the things, there's a teacher shortage across the nation, and we are blessed to have some really high quality educators here in the school district of South Milwaukee. But as neighboring districts are able to offer different compensation packages or increases or things like that, we have to make sure that we can stay competitive, right? But be reasonable to what our budget is able to do to make sure that we can retain and recruit the highest quality employees here.
Sure. So the biggest, you'd said short-term budget, the biggest thing that has changed since the last time we talked about this with Dan Arnold, our business manager, director, was kind of the trick that the governor has the ability to use with his veto and selecting certain words and changing. And what really changed from last time we talked was that 325 was for 2 years. And with the swipe of the pen, our governor made it 400 years. What does that mean?
Yeah. And again, it's an interesting way that the veto power that's gotten some national attention that the governor here in Wisconsin has. And that's been used in the past by previous governors as well. So we'll see if that holds up in the courts, right? And my guess is that'll get challenged. But we'll see if it holds up throughout the system. What that means for us is the predictability around a budget long term means that in 8 to 10 years, as we now are able to project out that far, knowing what our income will be, technically, how that all works, that really does mitigate some of the shortfalls that our budget has. In the short term, we're still going to face some really significant challenges, but that actually helps us in the long run get back to a balanced budget here in South Milwaukee. So that's the beauty of what that decision did. The other thing that it did, if again, assuming that that stays, right? The other thing that it did for us is provided some predictability in the budget. The challenge in school budgets is they're reliant on the biennium budget. So we don't always know. Expenses start at the start of a fiscal year, which is July 1, right? And on July 1, we do not always know what we're going to be receiving from the state. So every other year, you're in a bit of a guessing game, for lack of a better term, on what your dollars that you have to work with are going to be. And at that point, you can't wait to hire teachers or other things, which is the biggest expense that school districts have, until then, or you won't have, again, high quality instructors in front of our students each day. So that's the difficulty in planning for school district budgets, is that lack of predictability. That's a great thing that provided to your local neighborhood public school, is some predictability for longer term planning, again, assuming that it sticks.
Yeah. So just for listeners that may not have religiously listened to this podcast, that our budget, the preliminary budget estimated, best guess, was an increase of $200 per student. So that's what that budget was. So like you said, the deficit spending that the board decided shrunk when it went up to 325, but that still leaves that gap. But now if it's predictable, if it holds up, if more legislation isn't passed, it negates that 325 every year for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it makes up some of the gap of the increase. Inflationary costs for a school district go up just like they do for our local community, right? So gas and electric is more expensive for us than it was a year ago, and employee benefits are more expensive than they were a year ago. And so those things go up, and when you don't have that increase in funding, then that's the challenge. And school districts, we can't get funding, we're not by statute allowed to just go seek funding from other avenues. We can't do certain things. So that becomes, the work that we get to do here is how to be as fiscally responsible as we can with the local taxpayer dollars, right? To be sure that we are creating the experiences for kids in our schools that create a stronger community. Because strong schools create a strong community, and that's what they do. We create citizens that come back and contribute to this community.
Sure.
And again, that's a beauty of South Milwaukee, is that there are so many people who choose to come back and live and work in this community if they've chosen to go off to 2-year or 4-year colleges, or they live and work in this community right out of high school.
Yeah.
It's such a strength of this community in South Milwaukee. And so our job becomes, how do we center what the community needs and is looking for in creating those citizens who come back to contribute?